very study on women human rights defenders. So as we've been hearing from women human rights defenders around the world, today we have Teresita Quintos Delis, who is from the Philippines, presidential advisor on the peace process, and currently the chairperson of the International Center on Innovation, Transformation, and Excellence in Governance, InsightGov. And she has been very involved in having the Philippines become the first country in Asia Pacific to start and enforce a national action plan on women, peace, and security. So we're very pleased to have you with us. We'll ask you to say some initial remarks for about 10 minutes, and then we'll go to questions and answers from the committee members. Go ahead.
To the Honorable Chair and members of the Subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to appear before you this afternoon. Madam Chair, it is with some reluctance but also great urgency that I have come from the other side of the globe to speak on the human rights situation in the Philippines, particularly the disturbing climate of unreserved and blatant targeting and victimization of women that today prevails under the Duterte regime. Reluctance because, to be frank, human rights has not really been the focus of my work. My major efforts, especially in the last decade or so, have focused on the field of conflict resolution and peace building. And while I have dealt with the issues of women's economic rights, political empowerment, child care support, and violence against women, the attacks faced by Filipino women today are different. They are vulgar, carried out publicly and without restraint, and outside of any personal relationship with the targets. The vilification of women human rights advocates appears to be without any moral or social mooring or justification. Most tellingly, it is done without any provocation, other than what is well known and documented, that women have been among the first, most vocal, and most consistent in speaking up against the abuses of the regime. In short, this period is unique in our history. We had thought then that Marcos' statement directed against Cory Aquino, that women belong in the bedroom, was already the height of misogyny. The intervening years and the many gains that the women's movement has attained, including broader political and social participation in government and in the private sector, and the passage of a wide range of laws, including the Magna Carta of Women, have contributed to our confidence, even complacence, that attacks against women of the sort, gravity, frequency, flagrancy, and willfulness, as is now being perpetrated by Duterte and his minions, are not even a thing of the past in Philippine society. It was never acceptable, and we believed it never would be. And yet here we are, just 2.5 years into his presidency, and Duterte has already succeeded in victimizing every single woman who has heard him order soldiers to shoot women rebels in the vagina to make them worthless. Reminisce about his sexually violating their family helper while she slept. Opine that rape and sexual assault are only to be expected if a woman is attractive. Trivialize the trauma of sexual violence when he called his own daughter a drama queen when she spoke up about being raped. Early in his presidential campaign, he joked that the mayor should have been first, quote-unquote, in raping a murdered Australian nun. He has called women who oppose him sluts and immoral women in order to undermine the truth that they dare speak to his power. Thus, I also come before you today with a sense of urgency, because perhaps the most dangerous thing we can do is to think that, one, this behavior by the president only affects women, and second, Duterte is simply unhinged when he makes these statements or condones behavior and mindsets detrimental to women. There is, in fact, method to his madness. Duterte has weaponized the degradation of women in order to delegitimize their calls for the government to discharge its constitutional duty and international obligation to respect and promote human rights and to defend Philippine sovereignty and democracy. His are calculated attacks that aim to silence dissent by making an example of the women who he has publicly vilified, slut-shamed, and punished in order to promote a culture of impunity that has resulted in the narrowing of political, social, and economic discourse in the country. Along with the systematic erosion of the independence of institutions that are meant to serve as checks on the abuse and concentration of powers, he has delivered one message: If you don't want to be attacked, don't speak out against Duterte. Better yet, toe the line and support Duterte's narrative. There are no extrajudicial killings. Everything is going well in Mindanao. Philippine sovereignty is robust and kicking. Everything he says to the contrary is just a joke, and every fact that points to a different direction is fake news. He is turning the Filipino into his image of what a woman should be. Easily cowed, easily silenced, unquestioning, complicit. He may attempt to cast his attacks as gender-specific, but the damage he wreaks transcends gender lines. We can see it in whom he personally targets, strong and independent women. Women like Senator Laila de Lima, who, as then chair of the Senate Committee on Justice and Human Rights, initiated an inquiry into the spate of extrajudicial killings apparently connected with his declared war on drugs. One day, Senator de Lima was a well-respected public servant, serving her first term of office as an elected official, a lawyer by training, a defender of human rights and the rule of law by choice. The next day, she is all of a sudden the so-called mother of all drug lords, who today marks her 770th day in detention, based on trumped-up illegal drug trading charges that have no evidence to back them up, save for the self-serving and perjured testimonies of actual self-confessed drug lords. Women like Chief Justice Maria Lourdes Sereno, who was unconstitutionally ousted from her post after she dared call out the fakeness of Duterte's drug list, which included judges long dead or retired. Women like Senator Risa Hontiveros, who has been charged with everything from kidnapping to wiretapping, especially after she took steps to secure eyewitnesses to the killing of 17-year-old EJK victim Kian de los Santos, which to this date remains the only case out of thousands of deaths that has resulted in a conviction. Women like UN Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Victoria Tauli Corpus, who was tagged by the government as a member of a terrorist group, thus endangering her and undermining her work. Women like Maria Ressa, who now faces 11 live cases in court and who was arrested and released on bail for the 7th time last Friday, after she, as CEO of the online Rappler, came under attack by the Duterte administration for publishing incisive news and commentaries on national issues, including reporting on the so-called war on drugs. These have sent a very clear, chilling message. If this can be done to powerful and prominent women who already have a platform, resources, and political and legal acumen, not just to defend others but also themselves, then with greater ease can it be done to others. And it is being done to others, to the even more vulnerable of women and children. I will now speak about the two most pressing human rights crises we now face in the Philippines: the extrajudicial killings connected to the so-called war on drugs and the continuing crisis in Marawi City in Mindanao. Countless women and children have been widowed and orphaned by the bloody war on drugs. The actual death toll is disputed, but the Supreme Court has established that by 2017, 20,232 have already been killed. By now, the number could easily reach between 25,000 and 30,000. While most of those killed are men, a closer examination of the facts will reveal the severe impact on the women. Wives, mothers, sisters, daughters of the murdered men who are now left to pick up the pieces of their families' broken lives, finding livelihood, keeping children in school, addressing health issues which now include recovery and healing from trauma. These are their immediate concerns, assuming they have managed to give their dead a decent burial. A study conducted by my women's organization, Pilipina, furthermore underscores the violation of women's rights and dignity in the way the anti-drug operations are carried out. Among others, the violent intrusion into the homes of the poor, which are supposed to be women's safe and sacred space, no matter how lowly. Denial of the right to care for their dead or wounded. Theft of their few belongings. Threats of being taken to substitute for their targeted male relatives when they are not found in the premises. Vulnerability to sexual harassment, prostitution, and human trafficking. The women left behind have become, in the words of the study, and I quote, a new underclass among the urban poor, often ostracized and isolated by their neighbors, terrorized by barangay officials and the murderers of their family members, vulnerable to sexual exploitation. To date, 2 petitions have been filed for the issuance of a writ of amparo, a temporary protection order, prohibiting police authorities from getting near the residences and workplaces of the families of EJK victims. The second one was filed in October 2017 on behalf of the families of 35 residents of San Andres Bukid, an urban poor community in Manila, who were killed within a 13-month period. The San Andres Bukid petitioners were led by Sister Maria Juanita Daño of the Religious of the Good Shepherd, who has been living among the poor of San Andres for many years. Sister Juanita or Nenette has formed an all-women group, which meets weekly to reflect on the challenge of the gospel in their lives. Men were initially invited to join the group, but they didn't stay because they were not comfortable with the sharing process. When the killing started, the residents thought that the first death was meant only to serve as a warning to the drug users and pushers in the neighborhood. But the killings did not stop, and the rising number of fatalities included those not involved in drugs, including several youth. Members of Sister Nenette's core group were the first to act. In Sister Nenette's words, they were mothers. It was not okay with them that their neighbors were getting killed. They started with candle lighting and holding prayer service for the dead. Subtle actions, as Sister Nenette points out. They became even more disturbed when they heard people say that those who were killed were worthless and deserved to die. With no action forthcoming from their parish priest, Sister Nenette went to the bishop, who called for a meeting with NGO lawyers. The most eager among the lawyers was a young woman, Attorney Tin Antonio of Center Law. While gathering data and testimonies for the case, Attorney Antonio joined the women in cooking, washing clothes, and singing with the choir at funerals. Many of the petitioners were hesitant to join the legal action at first. They received threats from the police. The village officials got angry with them. Even their families asked if fighting the case would bring the dead back to life. But they persisted. Sister told the petitioners, even if we lose, at least you can say you fought for your loved ones. The media report about the deaths, but they have no names, only numbers. Identifying and naming them, you give them back their dignity. 2 days ago, the Supreme Court ordered the government to release all documents related to Duterte's war against drugs. The police assigned to the neighborhood have been changed. Killings have waned, but they still happen under a different form. No longer by the police, but riding in tandem teams. Every core group member now has a tarpaulin on the front door. On the tarp are written 10 basic rights of citizens. Everyone is encouraged to memorize the list so they know what to do in case they are picked up or threatened. Sister Nenette herself narrowly escaped being identified because she was not wearing a veil when the village ombud came looking for a nun. I now raise the second pressing human rights issue related to the displacement caused by the 5-month Marawi siege. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees reports that 77,170 families were displaced by the armed operation that began in May 1917. The city center was completely demolished, ancestral homes looted, properties destroyed, hundreds of lives lost, including 45 civilians. Families were and remain sundered. Now, almost 2 years after Duterte declared the liberation of Marawi, residents have not been allowed to return to the most affected area in the center of the city. Adding to their heartbreak, they continue to be excluded from any participation in the planning of the rehabilitation of their city. That war and displacement place a higher burden on women than on men is well documented worldwide. But even the start of the siege was ominous. When Duterte declared martial law covering the whole of Mindanao as a response to the siege, he sought to motivate the soldiers to fight by telling them that if they raped up to 3 women, it would be on him. Today, Marawi women find themselves dealing with a new reality of scarcity, marginalization, and physical and psychological insecurity, including unverified reports of sexual abuse. The tragedy is that the human rights defenders of Marawi are themselves displaced and among those who have lost everything. Civil society woman leader Samira Gutok was the lone Moro voice who persisted in speaking out against the declaration of martial law when the issue was debated on the floor of Congress. Her mother and 3-year-old son were caught in their home at the city center when the battle broke out. Her ancestral home and all in it were lost. Like most of her people, she identifies herself as an IDP. Marawi civil society leaders today are organizing and strategizing to get their voices heard by government, even as they are still dealing with the loss of their dead and the missing, inhuman conditions in evacuation sites, the tearing up of the tightly woven social fabric of their lives, the threatened extinction of their culture and their identity, the complete lack of reliable information of what will happen next. They are standing up on their own because if not, who else will? Since the government seems intent to sweep the rubble of Marawi under the rug, as if an entire and bustling city and its needs and its people has turned invisible overnight. Now the greatest danger, and I'll end here, in all these cases, from the vilification of powerful and empowering women to the victimization of other women, human rights defenders included, especially in those in the context of drug-related EJ case and the Marawi siege, is that no one seems to be listening while the government is exerting efforts to obscure reality. May I just end with the appeal to the international community. For survivors of EJK victims, primarily women, okay, we have tried to work, but this remains small and, to be candid, largely disjointed efforts. There is a feeling that to do too much is to catch attention, and to catch attention at this time may be counterproductive and even dangerous, which is why many people are resorting to more subtle forms of protest, if you may call them that, such as simply refusing to laugh at his jokes during his speeches, which is why we consider this as more than just a domestic concern. This calls for international solidarity. This, in fact, is the most appropriate time to mobilize the global community. For it is when local advocates are themselves being attacked and endangered that the international community of human rights defenders are most needed to step up. Let our people know that someone is watching. Help us to grow the hope and courage of your vigilance and solidarity, that we may break the climate of fear and impunity. Thus, we call on the international community not to depend on what the Philippine government says. Demand answers to your questions in the strongest possible terms. Leave the Duterte administration no doubt that a time for reckoning will come to those who refuse to respect human rights, especially those who prey on their own people for the sake of power. Thank you, Madam Chair, and all members of the subcommittee. Good afternoon.
Thank you very, very much, Ms. Quintos-Telis, and we're very pleased that we were able to bring you all the way from the Philippines here to be that voice. And as you know, this is a televised committee, so hopefully that will allow a lot of these issues to be aired. I'd like to go to questions now for 7 minutes each. We will start with Ms. Falk.
Thank you so much, Chair. And thank you for you being here and for your activism and for your voice. I know as being a young woman, sometimes it's difficult to know when is the right time to speak and not to be discouraged by the louder voices that don't want me to speak. So I want to thank you for your courage and for coming here. I had a question. During the first part of your testimony, you were talking about some different senators that have repercussions, I guess, for speaking up. And you had mentioned one of them one of the senators was in detention. So I'm just wondering if you could explain or elaborate to me just what that means. What does detention mean? Does that mean exclusion or seclusion or what?
Well, she was arrested. She is in jail, not in the regular jail, but in the custodial center of the Philippine National Police. She is in complete seclusion, not allowed to socialize with other detainees there. We can visit on hours. You have to submit your name a week before, and there are times when the custodial center says, no, you cannot. She is only brought out to attend hearings, and her security have really take pains to keep her out of view until we complained, really raising their hands to cover her up, coughing so that they will not be heard because media asks her questions and she shouts out. She does her legislative work by her staff who comes, and there are times when she is not allowed to meet her staff in full. She has to meet them one and by one and give instructions. She has been very busy because it is very important that we do not forget that she is there. So she puts out a daily dispatch. She does legislative work, but she is not allowed to vote, which has been a precedent with other legislators who were formerly in jail. They would be allowed to go physically to vote on important issues. She has not once been allowed to vote. So she was arrested in February 2017, which means she served 7 months outside of custody. Since then, she has been and continues to be in jail.
Okay. So a question that I have as well, I know you talked, about some of these women being slut-shamed, that type of thing. How are their personal reputations attacked? Like what is being done? And are any of the men that are in the country standing up or saying anything against this, or are they just being quiet and complacent?
Well, Senator De Lima, as I had said, she had started. She was the chair of the Human Rights Committee in the Senate, and she had started investigation into the killings, and the president charged her of being involved in the drug trade. She was previously the Secretary of Justice, and in fact was known to have been the first Secretary of Justice that went into prison and exposed the good conditions that some of those the drug lords were in there. But the president said no. She was had been in jail, and had the House Committee, the House of Representatives, where he has so-called supermajority, to do an investigation. And before that investigation happened, she said that there is a sex video of Senator De Lima having sex with her former bodyguard and security. It turns out that the senator had a discreet relationship with her security person. She is she's married. She was married, annulled. So it was completely something that was just their business. During the investigation, the slut shaming by congresspersons was terrible. They called the former security of Senator De Lima and asked him questions about did they enjoy sex, what was the level of enjoyment, etc. It was completely unreserved, and then they were all giggling and laughing. They threatened to show the sex video. That was where one of the maybe most imaginative actions of the women's movement came in. We put out a meme on social media saying, "I would like to testify in Congress. I am the woman in the sex video." And something that had started with only 50 women in a matter of 20 hours reached millions of reposts. Of course, the video was not shown because in truth it was not. It was a fake video from a pornographic. But that had done damage from a 60% approval rating at the time that she ran, because Senator De Lima was extraordinary in that she went from an appointed position to a national elective position. That was how much people trusted her and believed in her work. Had gone down by the time this slut shaming episode had happened. She was the one most publicly shamed, but the president likes to use it every time. When we raise questions, even the women's movement, then she will say, "Oh, these are old hags who are dried up and therefore they are bitter." Women like me.
Wow.
It is his favorite. It is his favorite sort of thing. Some of them, he's angry with the chair of the Human Rights Commission, who is male, and he calls him a fag. It is his most habitual thing is to call people not just innuendos, it's real outright slut shaming.
Okay, well, thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much. We're now going to move over to Ms. Khalid, who has 7 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much, Madame Quintos Deles, for your testimony and for the great work that you're doing. I want to talk and then ask and pick your brain about the intersection between a robust human rights law within a country like the Philippines and how it impacts and could be kind of the foundation of providing better protections for women human rights defenders. So if you can advise us a little bit about the state of human rights in legislation in the Philippines. For example, like I would think, what kind of protections are there for violence against women specifically, and also about freedom of expression and how the two intersect in order to provide that defense in law for persons like yourself?
Yeah. As I had said, we in fact had over the years been able to put up a very strong architecture of legal protection for human rights, including for women's rights. So we have a Anti-Sexual Harassment Act, our humanitarian law in times of war is very strong on that. Our Magna Carta on women also has very strong protection on women. Our anti-rape law has been updated, so it is no longer, as it was in the beginning, a crime against chastity. It is a crime against persons. Rape in marriage is forbidden. I mean, it's there, and our human rights laws are there. We have, as I said, even in times of war, that is in place. And that was, as I said, our sense of confidence and complacence that since the Marcos time we had reached some level that we could rest on that we were in fact thinking in the women's movement in particular that our problem was now housekeeping, enforcing the laws, making sure that these were done, that the implementing rules and regulations were okay. We are completely unprepared and still unable to understand what is happening now. That the president says, "I do not care about the law," and that is the quandary. I think we believed very much that the law should protect, and that it is there to protect us, and that those who are weak, especially need it, that we need the rule of law, and over the years had been undergoing this reform, including the reform of the security sector. But that is why I think there is so much of the fear and the threat that happens now, and the insulting publicly, because then people think twice as to whether they should speak out, because anyone who has dared to raise a question has received it in verbal assaults. Well, just a few hours ago, when Senator Drilon, one of our veteran senators, told him just to be careful in the review of the contracts of government, said, "Well, if you don't stop it, I will suspend the writ of habeas corpus, and I will arrest all of you. You are no different from rebels, criminals, and drug users. I will arrest all of you." That is what he said. So, the law is important, but it has really what this sort of assault on human rights and the rule of law, and the lack of reservation in the way personal attacks are being made did stunt us for a while, but the law is there. So that is what we are counting on, that there will be a time of reckoning, And I think in time that people are getting braver and collectively coming together to say this cannot be. So the law is important, but it also, I think, the dilemma is that we now have leaders like this who seem to think they can get away.
Right. You spoke.
And we do allow them for a while.
You spoke about having a social media campaign around collectively defending somebody who was being attacked and then slut-shamed, as you said. So can you talk a little bit about the role of social media and the internet in terms of really raising awareness of what the law is in the land and creating kind of a united front against people that violate that law?
In the Philippines, social media has been two-edged. And I will have to say that the ones who weaponized it against human rights used it first. That the trolling is terrible. And the trolling is sexual. And it threatens rape. And the rape not just of you, but of your children. But it took a while, but we realized, okay, that's the weapon of choice. We need to take it in our hands, and there has been a pushback. There has been a pushback, but the what we fight against is because the other side is so well resourced, and doing a good social media program needs resources. They have trolling. They have troll farms, as they say. So messages coming, but we do realize when you learn to attack and put it to reason that they don't know how to argue back, because the only thing that they know how to do is to threaten you with rape, to call you all sorts of names. So that is what is happening now. The resistance, the groups in the resistance, are learning to use social media also in very smart ways. But we are our disadvantage is we don't have the resources that is also needed in order to keep a good social media program going. We have one social media campaign, the Bantay Bastos, which is guard against crassness, to call out everyone. But that's what I'm saying. It's there, but hard to maintain it on the level that it should be.
Thank you very much. We will now move to Ms. Hardcastle for 7 minutes.
Thank you. What was the name of that social media program you just said? It's hard to make.
Bantay Bastos.
Bantay Bastos. Is that something, I don't know, is that something the international women's community, women human rights defenders in other areas are in a better position to help with? What kind of social media controls are there? It would seem to me that you are more vulnerable speaking up in the country, but if you have an international community that is remaining vigilant as well, I don't know if there's opportunity there or if it's really controlled. What do you...
Well, it would, except that the president so far has called any international criticism also as part of the yellow army. But yes, an international support would help, but also internally. When I mean we need resources, it means we need to be able to have people who can do it full time.
Yeah,
we don't. Because people like me are doing other sorts of work. We have not yet been able, in the network that we are growing, that are determined to push back, we have not yet had the resource to even put someone to do this as full-time work. Mm-hmm. Our people are doing street action, doing research.
So is that, I'm just trying to... We're trying to look at this through a lens of like, what are some of the things that Canada can be more proactive with? So I'm not sure what the role of the UN Commission is at this point for human rights. If you think there's ways that we can be supporting that, or are there opportunities in, I don't know, what about legal defense? Or if if the sorry to cut you off, if this president isn't respecting the rule of law, is that sort of a waste of the limited resources you have then? And
No, in fact, that's why we're saying that the international arenas for recourse are so important not to give up.
okay,
He curses them. He has cursed the ICC prosecutor. He has cursed the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights. But you're out there, so he cannot really harm you. So
yeah,
it's important
exactly.
that you keep on going. It was very well appreciated at home when several parliaments, I believe the chair was the one who sponsored the bill on Senator De Lima, because that we pick
Yeah.
that up. We pick that up, and it gives us spirit. It gives us hope that people are not forgetting that we are getting darker and darker.
Okay. And what about the media? What about the role of the media? Or are they complicit in some of this? I'm just finding it hard to believe that a president like this can just come in and everyone's so shocked by his conduct.
Well,
So somewhere there was. Go ahead.
yeah. So you know what happened to Rappler? The Maria Ressa, who
Right.
was recognized. Yeah, she has so many cases now, and even her board of her board, which are also composed of private sector, have now also been filed cases. The franchises of our TV networks are which have to be renewed every few years. They are now under threat. Our major newspaper that was very critical was also put under threat. We don't believe it is an excuse for them to give up. But they have been stymied in a way, but we are very, very, very... it is good that there are media people who are standing up and doing all sorts of programs. We are very grateful, for example, for the so-called night crawlers, the photographers who keep on documenting the killings all over Manila and continuing to publish that. Some of these night crawlers have had to leave their job to do freelance work, because otherwise they would have to seek permission for the newspaper. So really our media is also under threat. There are media people who are standing strong. I think the value of press freedom has now also raised a higher level among the public. When they saw how Maria Ressa was clearly, this was all political persecution that was happening. So it is that's the reality. The attacks are relentless and strong, but we are growing the resistance, and it is, when you talk about international support, that recognition of the work that's going on, that recognition of the human rights challenges that we are facing continuously, relentlessly, is also means so much to us.
Oh, I have 1 minute. I think you were going to tell us a little bit more about the about vilification, and maybe talk to us about how can, if let's say we get an international community together, is that something that social media can actually counter very effectively then?
Yes, and we do pick up everything that comes out from abroad. It helps. It helps to tell the people, and I think more and more Filipinos are awakening to that. That is also the truth. There is that there is a constituency that likes Duterte and are very loud and well resourced to do it. But I do believe that there is also the community that is saying no, he has crossed the line too many times. Are also beginning to stand up and are always being appreciate the support that comes from outside, that reminds us we are part of a community of nations that has built a regime of human rights that we were once so strongly part of.
Thank you very much. We're now going into the second round, which is 5-minute questions, and we'll start with Mr. Fregis-Catos.
Chair, thank you very much, Ms. Dellis, for being here today. I wanted to ask you about the sources of opposition to the current regime and Mr. Duterte in particular. And in your opening statement, you pointed towards civil society, or you raised examples of civil society. I wonder if you could expand on that. Does civil society really comprise the main space of opposition for women and women's organizations in particular? They've taken the lead. I'm going to, you're nodding, so they have, but how difficult is it for them to operate?
Yes, they have taken the lead because the government institutions that are supposed to be doing this are not. We have a Philippine commission, Women's Commission, which is supposed to be the guardian of the Magna Carta of women, but they have been well quiet. Of course, he appoints the people. He appoints the people to these commissions, and they say the civil service that is still there will say, yes, we call him out. We write a statement to call him out when he comes out with the statements, as I have quoted. We submit them. Of course, they submit them to the House, to the Office of the President, and they don't know what happens. So, in fact, it is civil society that one of the earliest sectors in Philippine society that stood out to say no, this cannot be, is the women's movement. In fact, we had to do a lot of reawakening of the passion of feminism, because I will say we had gotten complacent. We had gotten to the level of doing checklist women and development stuff. What do you need? We had felt, we were really quite out of this kind of a danger. But very quickly that has revived. And what I'm happy to say is that, in fact, the intergenerational thing in the women's movement is one of the most hopeful things of older women like me and the young women that are coming up are talking to each other and finding out what that means. But I think, in fact, and it is one of my advocacies, and I hope that there will be assistance here, is that we need to set up a parallel type of guardian of women's rights, because our official institutions are not working. We need to be able to bring together prominent individuals who we can say it may be a bit of a self-commissioning, but to become recognized in our society again, that somebody speaks out publicly and in one voice with strong gravitas when the need to push back is there.
Thank you for that. And I think you have an ally in Canada. You will know, of course, that our government has spoken out strongly on extrajudicial killings, and we are, as part of our foreign policy agenda and the development policy in particular that we've spearheaded under the Prime Minister and under then Minister Bibo in International Development and now Minister Monsef, we have seized the moment to fund women's organizations, because we truly believe in making that a fundamental cornerstone of our foreign policy and development policy. And that includes in the Philippines. What else would you like to see Canada do?
No, I would like to see more the Canadian Embassy, for example, getting more engaged in the democratic discourse at home. We hear it from outside. We don't hear it from your representatives inside the Philippines. We are aware of your programs in terms of women and livelihood, but there's a bigger assault now, and we do not see that the diplomatic community at home and that even the small mission projects, mission-funded projects, are looking and recognizing that, in fact, we have a different threat that faces us now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We'll now go to Mr. Sweet for 5 minutes.
Ms. Quintas-Dallas, I read your bio. You've had an extraordinary life in human rights. We can't thank you enough for your good work. Your courage has already been mentioned, so I wanted to ask you directly, because you've mentioned some heinous treatment that women have faced who've spoken up. You're here televised, speaking up very clearly. Are you concerned for your own safety in this regard?
Every time you think twice, but I think you have no choice. I've fought all my life. I fought the Marcos dictatorship. I did it for my children. I now have a grandchild. And I cannot imagine my grandchild being raised where I could not let him listen to the president, not being able to look up to the president, not that I could not tell him to respect the president for his views. So I think there is no choice. I have chosen. I have stood on at the age of 70, climbed again the truck to make a speech and call the president a coward, because if you don't do it, then who will do it? Mm-hmm. And we have just invested so much in the democratic project, and we thought we were winning it, that we cannot now. I could not now. And I think that is why the gray power in the Philippines is now coming out. It's because it would be a repudiation of what we have spent our lives for, that at this time we give up. As someone had said, who is now a widow, if I was not afraid before, even more so now, because I have fewer years in my life now. We have more people on the other side of life. So we have to do it. And I think our effort, of course, is that we are able to touch, reconnect, make the connection with the younger generation, learn to speak each other's language, because the reality is we don't. We don't. The millennials don't. And that has been one of the challenges, and certainly one of the most rewarding things, that the younger women are now claiming feminism again and are saying, yes, we value the same values, but we will fight it our way. That's fine. Some of our creative actions recently were designed by them, and it was good. It was refreshing. We go and stand out, and it is good that we can work with our young women who have more creative ideas about how to do street action. We don't do the rituals, just the old rituals anymore when we go on stage, when we do our rallies. That is one of the things that we continue to do. But it is a question that we ask: how can you face yourself in the mirror in the morning, and how do you explain yourself to your child or your grandchild that you let that go? That is a major question that we are asking. What will the future generations ask of us? What did we do during this dark time? And for whatever it's worth, I would like to be able to say, I did my part.
And it sounds to me, and I'm just trying to identify, because we want to do a report, and we want to illustrate exactly all of the different places where women's human rights defenders are mistreated in different ways and different reasons. And it sounds to me like, particularly when I see the Philippines have wrestled with some pretty interesting leaders over my lifetime, and I see Duarte has withdrawn from the International Criminal Court. Was actually, the Philippines is on the United Nations Human Rights Council, and I mean, it sounds to me that one of the challenges, in spite of that should really ignite people passionately in the Philippines. That one of the things you're wrestling with is men particularly, but maybe some women as well, that just won't speak up as well in the Philippines and push back on this kind of tyranny from the president.
And unfortunately, we have to hold that answer because we're at the 5 minutes. But we will go to Mr. Tabera for 5 minutes, and perhaps you can address that in one of your future answers.
If you wanted to continue maybe answering his question, I'll
We continue to count on that. We continue to hold to the ICC's declaration that the crimes committed before he withdrew are still subject to reckoning. It is one of the things that we hold on to, that reckoning will happen, if not today, sometime in the future, if not in the Philippines, internationally, and that we will come around again to be the Filipino people who defend human rights.
for being here. And my question is within the legal court system. Whenever female women human rights defenders speak out about some of the atrocities and some of the injustices that are placed against them, within the court proceedings, do we see what's the word I'm looking for? Do we see some discrepancies between how men and women are treated when it comes to criticizing the regime, and if you can give us maybe some examples, if you.
Well, one of the things is that so far in the Philippines, women have stood out faster and more consistently. It also so happened that some of the most crucial institutions were headed by women at the time that he took on. But of course, that has caused him to say, after, for example, the ousting of the Supreme Court Justice, that he would not appoint women again. Of course, it happened. He appointed another woman, but that was support that was completely on his side. The public shaming has been stronger. The use of sexual attacks have been stronger on women. The defense of women, I think, has been in a way weaker, because while we have very strong, empowered women in our public life, the reality is still that they are a minority. So, and men seem to be able to so far be able to take it. In fact, for a while, the thinking that this issue of the treatment of women is not a life or death issue. It is not the most important issue that we are facing, and we've had to fight that. And I think we are beginning to win that it is not a life or death issue, but it is an issue that strikes at our very cultural core. It is an issue that hits our soul, and that its impact is not just on this generation, but in the generations to come. I think there is greater awareness for that. But for a while, there was that you can let that go because this is not the life or death issue.
In terms of that awareness, I know the Philippines have had many struggles, whether it's with the economy or in the natural environment. But have you been able to branch out? Some of the women human rights defenders have been able to branch out to neighboring countries and kind of been able to talk about similar causes and similar struggles to ensure that they're treated equally and that are not being shamed by oppressive regimes?
Yeah. Yes, we are quite active now in the regional discourse. It is our message that we are a cautionary tale for women, that this is apparently not an aberration, because when I do go to other countries in Asia, the taxi driver, the tour guide, even a parliamentarian will tell me they like my president. And so I say, so we say in the women's movement in Asia that we need to talk more with each other. We are, in fact, have expressed in different countries that we need to do more South-South talking. We need to talk more about women. We do see the threat as not isolated, not isolated, that it is happening in different parts of the world, and the sisterhood needs to gather again.
Thank you very much. And for the final question, for 5 minutes, to Ms. Hardcastle.
Thanks. Oh, it's such a privilege to be with you today, because you're really expressing things so well. We've heard from other human rights defenders as well, and you're really getting to the heart of something that is universal. And I guess one of the things that intrigued me was when you talked about how Canada is supporting women and livelihood programs, and what we're looking at is something bigger here. Do you have a suggestion of how Canada could segue into addressing those bigger issues? I know I had asked you a little bit before about legal support, or I'm just trying to think of what there could possibly be that is appropriate in our international regime as well, right?
They need to talk to women who are in the resistance, and they're not talking to us. The livelihood projects stay on the livelihood level. But when you have a regime that looks at women this way, that livelihood will only go to up to a certain place. Duterte has chilled even the diplomatic community, because he has insulted some ambassadors. He has threatened to throw out some missions from the country. I think it is important that your representatives in the Philippines are braver and not be afraid to be seen talking to people who dare to question the president's not just policies, but his performance, his acting out. And then it could begin there, because our people have lots of ideas of what we'd like to do, and we can find spaces where we can do it. We can do it sometimes very bravely, but we can also do it sometimes very quietly, growing the movement, growing to understand. A lot has to happen in the Philippines about looking at what happened and why. And that is a discussion that needs time, it needs trust, it needs building connections among people, because you are going to have to do some self-examination, and we are also going to have to examine you. That needs trust. And I would like to say that in the past, the Canadian mission in the Philippines had that kind of a relationship with civil society, with the NGOs, and I don't think I'm mistaken here. I don't think it's there now. You have to talk to people like me at home. I'm not the only one. There are brave women, there are creative women, there are women of all ages from different sectors who are trying very hard, banging our heads on the wall to think of how do we break this? How do we break this non-violently? Because that is not our way. And it is good to feel, it's good to have those conversations coming also from outside that tells us that they recognize what we are going through, and that tells us that they are supporting, and that they believe also in the future that we continue to believe in.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much, Teresita Ging, Quintus Delis. I think that I speak for the committee to say we have great admiration for the work that you and the other women are doing in the Philippines, and we will be following very closely your future endeavors. And I want to thank you for your very compelling and open testimony today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Committee's adjourned. Wow.